Following program has adult language and plenty of spoilers. Listener be advised.
Fantastic Four. Spider-Man. Iron Man.
Spider-Woman.
Welcome to the Marvel Superheroes Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Diablo Frank, and with me is Illegal Machine.
Also known as Mac.
You're trying to rebrand as Mac at this point, it seems like.
It's just easier to say Mac.
Yeah, I like Illegal Machine, though, because we can always abbreviate, but Illegal Machine has some oomph to it. Mac sound like cheesy a little bit.
It's just short.
Yeah, it's just
Mac.
short.
You're going to refer to me to Mac the rest of the podcast.
It's true.
So
it is true.
Understand Mac.
So anyhow, well, one of these days I ought to call you the old Mac again, because I just like the sound of that one, too.
That would be the abbreviation of illegal and machine, correct? Yes. I have been known to go by that in the past as well.
Today, in the first edition, the not feature Mr. Fix-It, we're going to go back into Annihilation once more unto the breach, because we have to get through this one to get to the actual Annihilation miniseries. So it's Annihilation Ronan.
Dun, 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 Ronan.
The Ronan miniseries is a piece of shit. I think the worst miniseries of the set.
It's bad.
We've gone almost 2 months without covering Annihilation issues. We went from bi-weekly to monthly. We just didn't want to have to deal with this stuff. God, Ronan's so bad.
Who was the creative team on Ronan?
That was Simon Furman, who was a writer that I really liked when I was a kid on the Dragon's Claws series from Marvel UK. And I believe that Mr. Fix-It liked him when he worked on Transformers.
Transformers, they're the ones that are more than meets the eye, right?
Indeed. That's why Mr. Fix-It might have been here, but we couldn't quite get it all together. We've been trying. And then it was drawn by a fellow named Jorge Lucas, who I think is freaking awesome. I like the art in this book a fair amount, with the exception of it gets very cheesecakey.
Yeah, I didn't have any particular gripes with the art.
There was a lot of butt shots, but it has a nice Eurocentric vibe to it, so I did dig that
It's
aspect.
definitely offbeat, and it definitely looks different from the rest of the series, which is kind of good, because to this point, the art's been subpar, though I guess for a cosmic crossover, I guess it's not terrible. Jim Lee's not going to come do your Ronin four-parter, so...
The art wasn't my problem. The problem is the story is terrible. Annihilation Day. A destructive force punctures through the edge of our universe and slaughters millions of worlds. The moment this annihilation wave tore into our universe is marked as Annihilation Day. Annihilation Day plus 12. In disputed territory on the edge of both the Kree and Skrull empires, Ronan, the accuser, is arrested on charges of sedition against his own beloved Kree empire. Annihilation Day plus 29. Ronan's criminal trial concludes. He is convicted because of Tana Nile's testimony. Ronan vows to find those who bore false witness against him and clear his name. Plus 88. Tulk, a mercenary, informs Ronan of Tana Nile's whereabouts, the planet Guthab Omega. Tulk flies off-planet, and Ronan sets course for Guthab Omega. Plus 95. Ronan sets down and meets a group of Kree settlers who constantly fend off attacks by a group of female warriors called Graces. Gamora, leader of the Graces and Tana Nile's new protector, pursues Ronan to Abyss, a nearby city on Guthab Omega. There, she and Ronan lock horns in furious combat. Tulk is killed by the Annihilation Wave as it travels toward Kree space. Glorian, former apprentice to the Shaper of Worlds, manipulates Gamora and Ronan's brawl, harnessing the energy they generate to create Guthab Omega in his image. Ronan is in a race against time to find Tana Nile and get off-planet before the Annihilation Wave swarms Guthab Omega. Before Ronan can find Tana Nile, the Annihilation Wave swarms upon... God damn Omega, I'm tired of saying this fucking name. How many times do they have that in just this descriptive paragraph? This is exactly the kind of thing I hate about this book. And not only is it just the trashiest, shittiest filler material from 2000 AD, it betrays a complete disinterest in any of the individual characters. And frankly, it's a little bit fucking misogynistic. Look, one of my favorite books was Martial Law. They had a character called Virago, and she was a member of the Sirens. And for some reason, British people, whenever they want to do something that's an all-female group, they always bring up Virago. These Graces are on Virago Mountain. And the Graces, as treated in this series, they all seem like battered women who banded together, and maybe they're kicking ass like a biker gang from a grindhouse movie from the 70s. But for the most part, they all feel like a bunch of victims that are banding together to strengthen one another and support one another, and it's all very fucking touching. Guys don't fucking do this shit. And why is it that you get a group of women together and you have to treat them like they're fucking fragile like this? Also, the whole book is about Ronan beating the fuck out of these women because none of them can stand against them with the exception of Gamora, who during their big battle is having butt shots left, right, and center. And Gamora is completely out of character because she goes from the deadliest woman in the universe to being this chick who's hanging out with a bunch of other chicks on Virgo Mountain. There's this quasi-religious, quasi-zealot quality to it. Sisters are doing it for themselves kind of thing, which is not something that I've ever seen in the Gamora character. And then she goes from this story to being Nova's girlfriend in the Annihilation miniseries. Spoiler. It just does not fit with who the character was before the miniseries. It doesn't fit with who the character is after the miniseries. She's just product. It seems like the writer didn't do any research. Ronan is, of course, a fanatical fascistic who's running around judging people over whom he actually has no jurisdiction. There's an alien planet that he's on, and he's rendering judgment that causes political chaos because he doesn't understand the culture, applying Kree rules. I like the way that they handled that about the character because he is that guy. But all these other characters, Nebula turns up and gets into a fight with Ronan. Here's Nebula, who's one of the major characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. She's set up as essentially a nemesis for Gamora, which isn't the case in the comic books, but it worked really well cinematically. Here, she's just another chick for Ronan to beat the hell out of. That Cersei character, the Shi'ar. And I had to go research this because I forgot who the heck this was. She's the one who was in Excalibur back in the mid-90s, before she got forgotten about. She's in this. She wasn't even a villainous character. There's no reason for her to be working with this group. There's a number of smaller Kree characters that had appeared in stuff like Operation Galactic Storm. They get killed off just for some vague sense of impact. They could have used a generic character instead of throwing these guys under the bus. It doesn't work at all. Totally hacky, passionless, bloodless scripting from Simon Furman. He doesn't give a fuck, and I don't see any reason why we should give a fuck either. Plus, for some reason, they keep coloring Gamora white. I don't understand why they couldn't get her coloring right. That's a basic thing, it would seem to me.
Yeah. So the main question is throughout this series, how is he going to get unframed? How is he going to clear his name?
Yeah, because one of his major moral choices in the story is the Annihilation Wave is coming, and he knows that. So does he drop his pursuit of clearing his own name in order to warn the Kree Empire that this is a thing that's going to happen that they need to be ready for? Or does he say, fuck the Kree, I'm going to clear my name because I'm more important than the actual Kree themselves? And I think if you look at the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, the choice was he's more important than his race. In the comic, ultimately, even though his actions are being impacted by the Shaper of Worlds, he's manipulating people into fighting one another. He basically is turning goddamn Omega, whatever the fuck that planet's called, into his own personal battle world and using the energies from unleashing these battles to reshape the world the way he wants it. Then the Annihilation Wave comes and wipes out his good work and drives him insane. And that's part of what helps to liberate Ronan and give him the opportunity to make the choice that he wants to make. The artist does a great job of rendering these insect hordes as they're overcoming this world in fine, intricate detail. So I want to like this book, but it's such a fucking slog to get through. And the fact that we've actually had attrition, we've lost one of the members of our trio for the only part of Annihilation because we just struggled so hard to get to this point, to get through this one stupid, shitty miniseries and wrap up our Annihilation coverage so we can do other things. It goes to show you just how terrible this book is. At least Silver Surfer, while I didn't like it, and the art was awful in that book, it at least went somewhere. This entire miniseries is completely unnecessary. You don't need Ronan for any of this stuff.
Yeah, and like Super Skrull was completely unneeded also, but at least it was a decent story. At least
I think it advanced that character where the Ronan miniseries actually makes the character diminished by the end of it.
And it contributes nothing to the
overarching story. The Annihilation. It really does feel like somebody cashed a check on this damn thing. I put the lion's share of the blame on Simon Furman. This series probably had more cameos from very minor characters. There's a Skrull that couldn't shapeshift that appeared in that one Hulk story where Margot and Rick Jones are getting married. There's lots of little stuff like that where they found these old characters and stick them in here. But it almost feels like the editor must have come up with that, or the artist, because the writer shows no interest in writing these characters and certainly not writing them in character.
So we're going to go ahead and say that this is maintaining our streak of the only parts of Annihilation you need to read are Annihilation Prologue, Nova, and then the Annihilation miniseries. Fuck Drax.
Fuck Drax hard.
Fuck Silver Surfer. Fuck Ronan.
Instead of spending any more time on this shitty miniseries, I wanted to talk about Ronan as a character and discuss a little bit of his first appearance.
Let's do that. I'm down with that.
When did the Krees come into the Marvel Universe?
I have no fucking clue. I'm going to guess Fantastic Four.
When?
I'm going to take a shot in the dark, like Ozzy Osbourne, 1967.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh my God. Well, folks, that's it. We're wrapping up. That's the Marvel Superheroes podcast this evening. I want to thank all of our loyal listeners, and have a great night. Thank you. Drive safely. Thanks.
You're exactly right. It was 1967. The Skrull. When did they show up?
Much earlier, right?
Yeah, and because of the Kree-Skrull War that happened in the 1970s, if I recall correctly, or late 60s.
Right?
They're so closely intertwined that I've always tended to think they must have come out around the same time. They were both early Marvel creations. The Skrull are the second Marvel villains because they appear in Fantastic Four #2.
Third, Hetty would be the first Marvel villain. Go ahead.
Well, no, of the Marvel age of comics. Yeah,
Totally joking.
But
Hetty.
So anyway, the Skrulls have been around for a number of years. After Fantastic Four #50, Jack Kirby basically swore that he would never create another Silver Surfer for Marvel. He was done creating the type of characters that Marvel could go on to exploit and make tons of money off of while he continues to be denied any sort of genuine compensation for his efforts. And then he creates the Kree. They're first mentioned in Fantastic Four #64. Somebody unearths or activates a sentry that had been placed on an island on Earth there to detect, I think, power surges. The Fantastic Four have energy powers, and it detects them, and they realize that these guys could potentially be a threat. And so he's going to start taking over this Earth and regulating for the Kree.
That already sounds way better than what
the entire Ronan miniseries.
Not even close.
Yeah. Plus it's drawn by Jack Kirby. So the Sentry activates and he attacks the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four manage to destroy the Sentry, but then there's this ping where the Kree realize, oh crap, there's a force on the Earth that's powerful enough to take out one of our sentries. We need to go and render a judgment upon them and then figure out what we're going to do with Earth as well. The first page of Fantastic Force #65, the four are levitating in the midst of space, in the midst of this green Kirby crackle. The Kree Supreme Intelligence in its first appearance, which is this giant
green head.
It's this big green
tentacles.
mass with tentacles coming out of it, but it looks cool because he's got this shriveled face. So he's already said, I'm coming for you. The FF wake up and they're thinking, man, that was a fucked up dream. I can't believe this dream I had. And then they start comparing notes and they realize, oh shit, we all had the same dream. This is worrisome.
This is also, the Supreme Intelligence is also Freddy Krueger.
Fred Krueger, Mom.
Yeah,
Fred Krueger. Reed, of course, wants to deal with this. But Sue throws a tantrum and it's like, I don't believe it. I won't believe it. I don't want to believe it. I'm sick of adventure and peril. I just want to live a normal life. I want to set up housekeeping as Mrs. Reed Richards. I want to be involved with supermarkets instead of supervillains. And so Reed wraps his stretchy arm around her, coddles her, and says, listen, you lovely little cupcake. You know I'd do anything in the world for you. I'd face 1,000,000 superpowered foes without a second thought. But when I see one tear in your gorgeous eyes, it destroys me. I mean, you're right. I've been a blind, inconsiderate fool, and I'm going to make up for it. I want to buy you a whole new wardrobe, and then you and I will do the town like it's never been done before. Darling, I don't know what to say. Fine. Wives should be kissed, not heard. You son of a bitch.
My respect meter for Reed Richards just quintupled.
So anyhow, meanwhile, Ronan, who at this point is a Caucasian, and man, I gotta tell you, him with peachy white skin, weird looking.
Yeah, that's really strange.
He looks wrong in that green armor. So he's flying to this backwater bullshit planet thinking, man, Supreme Intelligence really has miscalled this. There's no reason for me to head out this way. But he's heading out that way. One thing I have to point out too, he's flying this exact same ship in his first appearance as appears in the Ronan the Accuser miniseries.
Oh, that's cool.
Jorge Lucas kicks fucking ass for doing stuff like that. This guy teleports to Earth. He has an aura of negativism, which makes him imperceptible to Earthlings. He starts wandering around and looking at the technology and deciding what he's going to do with the Earth. Eventually, he teleports all the members of the Fantastic Four back to New York to this cone of inhibition he has. Every time they teleport it, there's this sound. Reed and Sue, they've just sat down for a nice dinner. Donnie's out on a date with Alicia Masters, if I recall correctly. They're put on trial. They try to fight Ronan, and Ronan is just knocking the hell out of them. His, what is his damn thing called? Hold on a second. I got notes.
Hammer. Oh, it does have a name, doesn't it?
The universal weapon, the most generic name you could possibly have. So the universal weapon is basically the I'm going to stop whatever power you have wand. It manages to make Ben Grimm so heavy that he falls to the floor and can't get himself back up again. It makes the Human Torch blow out. Reed has to try to engage with him intellectually because he knows stretching ain't going to do the job. So he's managing to distract Ronan for a little while. Outside the cone, the police have this enormous, wonderful Kirby anti-aircraft weapon, essentially.
That is the pinnacle of Kirby weapon.
So
that
Kirby.
The cops are just using.
Yeah, it's just
so
regular
awesome.
cop. They're trying to blast the cone and they can't get into it. Reed announces Stratagem 32. So apparently they've actually managed to codify what plays they're going to use against the villain. It amounts to Thing does a backwards bear hug against Ronan and is hugging him from behind and holding his arms down. That's all it is. That gives the Fantastic Four enough time to regroup, and then they sort of flatten Ronan against the floor. Ronan uses his universal weapon and hits himself and disintegrates. If you wanted to have it out for bringing Ronan back from the movie universe, his universal weapon could apparently disintegrate and reintegrate him at a later date. But it was a pretty cool story, and it gave me a sense of why the Fantastic Four became popular, because when drawn by Jack Kirby, Reed isn't this lean guy they always draw him as in the later issues where he looks more like Plastic Man. He's a buff, man of action looking guy, and he's got those streaks of whiteness. They look so dynamic together as drawn by Kirby that it works, and I can see the appeal of those characters where normally I can't.
But they all kind of work together. If any one of them were on their own, it would probably be pretty terrible. So I just want to say, Ronan looks fucking badass. And I think I've said this before. Ronan has a badass costume. I dig the whole head helmet shroud thing. It connects to his shoulders. The universal weapon. Is it a hammer? Kind of, but it's like a gavel, right? Because that's what
he's a judge. Yeah,
right, he's a judge, so it makes sense. I don't know. There's just something about that character I've always thought looked so. Yeah. His name, Ronan the Accuser.
Yeah,
he's fantastic. I always really liked the aesthetics of the character. I haven't read too much with him, but when I hear Ronan, I'm like, shit, Ronan? Okay, I'll give it a shot. Which is kind of why I was so disappointed. The story sucked.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was looking for a cool Ronan story. When I picked it up, I was like, this is going to, especially with the art as good as it was, I'm like, this is going to be the winner. And for it to strike out as badly as it did was such a disappointment. But yeah, I mean, there's so many Fantastic Four villains that are goofy that you can't take seriously. Even though when you take Annihilation and you do him up right, he seems really freaking cool. But I've been perfectly happy to skip over Annihilation stories. Well, prior to this, because he's kind of sucks unless you do him just right. With Ronan, even though he's a Fantastic Four character, even though I hadn't had much exposure to, even though he's usually drawn by artists that aren't very good or very appealing to at least my generation, he's Ronan the Accuser. Your mind just fills up with notions of what you could do with a character with a name like that, with a modus operandi like that. We've talked before about what do you do with Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and I mentioned the Kree. Marvel's not waiting that long. Marvel is setting up the Kree in a big way now, because not only were they introduced in Guardians of the Galaxy via Ronan, and were the Kree, they didn't do much with the Kree besides established that Ronan was one of them, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate.
Well, in the first season of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they find a bisected blue alien from which they derived a serum that was what saved, or part of what saved Agent Coulson's life after he appeared to die in the Avengers. They've dove into the lore of that in the second season of S.H.I.E.L.D., where apparently there was a whole series of trials and a bunch of people went crazy and one of the guys was killing some of the other guys, the other ones went crazy, and Coulson is one of the only people that has managed to survive this process with his mind and spirit intact. It gives him an opportunity to seem more heroic because all these other agents faltered, where he's managed to overcome the stress caused by this connection to the Kree. But one side effect was he kept drawing these diagrams. Everybody else who'd been enhanced by this serum was doing the same thing, with the exception of one character, Skye, who has her own mysteries that they're unraveling on the show. They finally managed to put all those diagrams together, and it turns out that it forms a map of a city. The current theory, I haven't seen if it's on the new S.H.I.E.L.D. episode or not, is that that's Atlan, the secret city of the Inhumans. The Kree are connecting Guardians of the Galaxy, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and probably the Inhumans movie as well, and it's all going to end up being connected, and the Kree apparently are one of the major characters, concepts to gel the Marvel Universe and to allow for that expansion of the Marvel Universe. So the Kree are suddenly a very big deal.
Wow.
I'm very interested now, and I've always liked the Kree. The Skrulls, because they're goofy looking, it's easy to take them for granted. There's a reason why Super Skrull became such a joke over the years, beyond just him getting beat all the time, because he looks kind of goofy.
Well, and let's face it, shapeshifting is such a cop-out power.
I think shapeshifting is a great power if you use it well, but in the comics,
never
with
be
the
like,
Skrulls,
oh, we've been on your planet for forever. Oh, they were just shapeshifted, which is why it's so.
Well, most of the time they turn into something common, or they turn into a human being, and they change what appearance they have as a human being. Where I like the fascistic culture of the Kree. I remember in their Marvel Universe Handbook entry, they showed a Kree soldier in the garb of, I think, the classic Captain Marvel garb, and then they showed that each of the chest symbols they have and the colors they have designate their ranks in the military of the Kree. Stuff like that is so geeky cool that I always wanted to like the Kree more. before, but the problem is, by the time I was reading comics that featured the Kree, since most of the 80s I spent dealing with X-Men stuff, and I only started to branch out to the greater Marvel Universe in the early 90s at the worst time. And a lot of my exposure to them was honestly during the brown bomber jacket era of the Avengers. Since
Operation Galactic Storm.
Well, not even that, because I was coming in, the Kree had already been dismantled, so they were just these ragtag terroristic forces scattered amongst the planets.
Across the universe or whatever, yeah.
So when you're interested in this fascist army and you end up with just insurgents, it's not the same vibe. I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of cool stuff they're going to do with the Kree. And I'm wondering, given the connection between the Kree and Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, where they're going to go with all this Kree stuff that they're building up. Obviously, the Inhumans are going to play into that too, though, but you can feel the greater Marvel Universe connecting finally, which is exactly what you wanted from Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and drives that series forward.
And they may not touch on this either, but one of the most famous Krees, Captain Marvel, Marvel, who stricken with cancer it was Nitro, wasn't it? Who triggered Civil War. Huh?
So maybe we'll see Captain Marvel set up it prior to the Captain Marvel movie.
I don't know.
That's a possibility. I mean, honestly, they could have worked that into S.H.I.E.L.D. even.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
Super lame, but a really pivotal character.
Yeah. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. became very destabilized in the second season. It was a show about this group of the Scooby Gang investigating bullshit mysteries.
Which is why I hated it. Yeah.
Yeah. The second season, it's really not about the group anymore. It's about these individuals on individual missions, and they brought in all these new characters. Mockingbird is actually really cool on the show. After shitting on her a little bit in her Spotlight podcast episode, even though I kind of came around by the end, watching her on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., she's manipulating people, but she never has to be a woman to manipulate them. She's manipulating them on her own terms and without losing any of her strength, without having to play up any feminine weakness. She either fools you because she's a great actress or because she can do things that you can't do, or she just kicks your ass. It's been awesome to see that show blossom and to take advantage of the whole of the Marvel Universe, which is what we wanted to see done. And if they get the Kree in there and they actually build to the movies and can feed the movies instead of just having the movies feed them, it's just wonderful to see the possibilities finally beginning to be realized.
And it's pretty bold to mix the TV with the movie. TV to movie, movie to TV. It never really works.
Well, yeah, but it never, with very few exceptions, it hasn't even tried. It's like when they took Star Trek: The Next Generation and moved that into the film franchise, they never seemed to get away from the episodic TV mentality of that show.
Yeah.
Where the Star Trek cast from before, that was already a more dramatic show, a bigger, bolder show than Next Generation anyway. But it seemed like you traded out a motion picture for television series put on the screen, with the exception of First Contact. I don't think any of the other Star Trek Next Generation movies felt like movies. They just felt like big budget TV productions.
Yeah. Actually, I don't even know how big the budgets were.
No, compared to the stuff what we've got today, I mean, I'm sure it was a lot more expensive than a couple of individual episodes, but I'm sure they didn't cost as much as a season would have. With Marvel finally allowing Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. access to stuff like the Kree and allowing that to build into the Marvel universe, and hopefully a little bit of cross-bleeding, I'd love to see Mockingbird turn up in one of the Avengers movies and have her hanging out with Hawkeye, and because that character, as established on the TV show, is strong enough to hold her own on the movie screen. In fact, Kobe Smulders, who's a famous TV actress from How I Met Your Mother, I don't think she made the transition to this big screen terribly well. She actually functions better in smaller situations, like on the television show. It's kind of a shame that she didn't transition to Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because I don't feel like she works as well in the films.
Who is she?
Maria Hill. She's the one who worked under Nick Fury.
Oh, can't stand her.
And helps.
Don't like her.
Yeah.
She doesn't work.
It's the worst part of Avengers. The worst part of Avengers is the part that focuses on her and S.H.I.E.L.D. So.
Yeah, she's cardboard.
New Twitter followers include Kyle Benning and Plug-In Podcast. Twitter favorites come from Abel Pedzia, Ange, Charlton Hero, Chris William, Comic Geek Speak, Comics News, Count Druncula, Crusaders, Eel Perrin, Eternal Rage, Future Primitive, Jason Martinez, Knowing Flame Comics, Professor Riptide, Rachel and Miles of Explain the X-Men, Siskoid, Time Travel Films, Top 5 Road Crew, and Ya Boy at Augie3. Retweets were supplied by Charlton Hero, CJ, Count Druncula, Crusaders Media, Eternal Rage, Future Primitive, Knowing Flame Comics, Martin Gray, Marvel Quotes, Professor Riptide, again Rachel and Miles of Explain the X-Men, and the Uncanny X-Cast. Knowing Flame Comics said, "Cheers for the shout. Keep up the awesome work with the podcast. If you like good comic book podcasts, give @Rolled Spine and @Chronic Insomnia a listen. Guanaman said his top comic casts included X-Aspirations, Uncanny X-Cast, Explain the X-Men, Leyland Andrews' Hey Kids Comics, and Comic Geek Speaks Time Bubble. He also said that he loved the Patsy Walker and the Cat episodes. Fascinating stuff. Where can I get a #Frank's Agenda t-shirt? Rachel and Miles of Explain the X-Men said, thanks for the shout-out, in great company. Uncanny X-Cast said, appreciate the shout-out. Randy Caldwell said, it took a while to get through the Howard the Duck episode. I don't have any issues. I need to watch the movie but George Lucas. Professor Riptide said, thanks guys, loving the show. Maybe you want to watch Howard again. Martin Gray, in reply to Professor Riptide, said, I haven't seen that film, darn. Charlton Hero said, I vividly remember that the studio went out of its way to not feature Howard prior to the film's release. I saw the movie as a kid on VHS for the first time and had to say I was disappointed. It completely failed to capture Howard the Duck comic book character. Years later, I can now tolerate the movie for nostalgia purposes. Great show as usual, guys. Any chance of covering the 1970s Doctor Strange TV movie? I'm pretty sure we'll get to that eventually, but I think I'm going to torment the guys enough in the near future without throwing that their way. Jason Martinez let us know that he's listening to the Marvel DC Movie Slate 2020 Doctor Strange vs. the Flash episode. Eternal Rage said, damn it, fix it. The movie was 42, not 51. I remember the Wizard castings. My favorite was Glenn Danzig as Wolverine and Jean-Claude Van Damme as Gambit. You want to read a great Rogues Gallery story? Pick up Forever Evil, Rogues Rebellion. Great buddy story with fantastic art. I'm more into seeing Doctor Strange movie. That may change with the first botch video from the set bullshit. And he said in quotations, I just turn off my brain and enjoy. Count Dracula said, nice short and sweet episode. I'm glad I wasn't the only one disappointed by X-Men Days of Future Past, although I think I was even more critical about it. I don't think I've seen Ezra Miller in anything, but my initial response to his casting was that he looks like he's 12 years old. That made me think he could be playing Bart Allen coming from the future, which would at least be a different take on the character's origin, but he's derivative, so they would still have to explain Barry. If Warner Brothers makes the movie Flash a gay man, I hope they make him a brand new character. As Frank said in a previous episode, DC made Alan Scott gay for the New 52, and the character was so fundamentally different anyway that he was Alan Scott in name only. But now the comics prematurely killed off the chance for Alan's descendants to pop up. I've seen Benedict Cumberbatch in a lot of movies, television, and even stage plays, and I think he's a terrific actor that has a very specific skill set. I think his clinical sort of detachment seems very appealing to what casual fans see in Doctor Strange, but not what Frank and Max see in the character from the comics. I'm a little on the fence. Cumberbatch isn't my first choice, but he wouldn't ruin the film. Also, if James Gunn is to be believed, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 Electric Boogaloo will be independent and not a setup for Infinity War. I have a feeling the next time we see Thanos will be in Thor Ragnarok. Kevin Feige said the third Thor film will be a universe change a la the Winter Soldier. I take that to mean the destruction of Asgard as we know it, either completely wiped out or it crashes onto Earth like it has in the comics a couple of times. But Asgard is home to at least one of the Infinity Stones and the gauntlet in Odin's trophy room. So either Loki gives those items to Thanos, or the Mad Titan walks through the dust and debris after Surtur runs amok and collects his prizes. Also, Judy Greer confirmed that what many suspected, that she's playing Scott Lang's ex-wife in Ant-Man. I was hoping she'd play Janet in a flashback. Count Dracula also supplied art for another one of his Twisted Toy Fair Theater style action figure playdate thingamajiggies. Anyway, it's cool. It pokes fun at the podcast, and it's on the blog if you want to check that out. Siskoid said, first off, let me start with my wholehearted agreements with Frank. It happens more than you think. Yes, X-Men Days of Future Past totally lost the plot. I'm also very critical of it, and of everyone who oversold it, saying it was one of the best superhero films ever. Yes, the Defenders and solo heroes of the Marvel U have no business being in the Avengers. And the fact everyone ever is an Avenger has diluted the brand tremendously. Further, yes, I will agree that Doctor Strange should be an American, though not that a Brit in the role. And he may or may not change accents, means it'll be Harry Potter. I'm pretty sure it won't be that. But while I'm in no geographical position to argue with your notion that Cumberbatch isn't well known in the States, your various mispronunciations of the name is evidence of that, I suppose. I think you'll eventually have to eat your words regarding his casting when he becomes truly ubiquitous over the next year, in all likelihood getting an Oscar nom for The Imitation Game. It's very hard to forget a name like Benedict Cumberbatch once you've heard it, which will help even the most dedicated IMDb denier in among the rubes. By the time Doctor Strange comes out, Cumberbatch's star will have ascended, because it's in the process of doing so. Sherlock is a lot more popular, I think, than you give it credit, and the internet's love affair with the man, and at the moment because of his impression skills, insane version of the bucket challenge, and inability to pronounce penguins, as featured in that Madagascar movie, will translate into notoriety for a superhero movie. I'd imagine the Venn diagram on superhero movies and people who live their lives on the internet has a pretty large common area. But that's just me. I live on the internet too. Finally, Ange wrote, a short and sweet episode deserves a short and sweet response. Cumberbatch seems like too much of a snore to be a good Strange. I think the Flash movie will be one of the better DC movies. Suicide Squad sounds more intriguing now that we have heard the cast. Roby as Harley is brilliant.
The Marvel Superheroes podcast is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by Marvel Entertainment. All characters mentioned and audio clips employed are believed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended against their copyright holders. The views expressed in this podcast are assumed legitimate, truthful, and solely possessed by the speaker.
Then move on to the things.
Okay. Welcome to the Marvel Superheroes Podcast.
Well, I
I'm
ain't
the
even
Legal
remotely
Machine, and
ready
with
yet.
you
Hold on.
is...
No, I
Frank.
just talked over
And I'm
this
Mr.
stuff.
Fix-It, bro. Let's talk about this shit, huh, man?